It broke. They had one job, and they were wrong about that one job, but their one job was to keep prices low. In COVID, the supply chains broke. That market they built, it broke, and people died because it broke. And there's an opening here to say, like, they can't even work on their own terms. Tyson's profits are going up. You may have seen yesterday's news. It's not a big surprise. Big ag profitability is going up. Their system was supposed to keep, all the money flowing to consumers. It doesn't work. It is not consumers' problem. It is our collective job to organize an economy where you can have a free and fair and open economy. I do not think it is a consumer problem.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Lindley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops that are grown in healthy soils and organic livestock that is raised on well-managed pasture. You just heard from Zephyr Teachout. She's the inspiring anti-monopolist voice behind this year's Real Organic Symposium. Today's episode is from a live panel we hosted at our Churchtown Dairy Symposium last October. The panel included Zephyr, Dave Chapman, and Executive Director of Hudson Carbon, Matt Sheffer. As you'll hear, one of the sticking points we'll be addressing in this year's symposium is how to focus our activist energy both as individuals and as a collective. Should we work to shape and reform policy, or should we abandon the system completely as we try and build a small farm revolution? This conversation and more will be featured in our upcoming symposium, Break 'em Up, the chickenization of organic. Session 1 is this Sunday, March 17th from 3 to 5 Eastern, and the second session will air on April 7th. We hope you'll join us in the discussions, and you can find out all the details by visiting our main menu of our website, realorganicproject.org.
Good morning.
Oh, they're on.
Morning, everyone. My name is Matt Sheffer, and I am the Executive Director of Hudson Carbon and Director of Policy at Foundation for Agricultural Integrity here at Churchtown Dairy. And I have here on the stage with me today Dave Chapman, the co-founder of the Real Organic Project, and Zephyr Teachout, Associate Professor of Law at Fordham University.
You know what? It was probably about 7 years ago. I just keep forgetting to update my bio. It doesn't matter, but I'm actually now a professor.
Professor. And former gubernatorial candidate in New York State. And we're going to talk about the Real Organic Project through the lens of policy. So I'm hoping to have a provocative conversation. So to kick it off, Dave, I've heard you describe what's happening at the USDA as a crisis of democracy, and that is in some ways the impetus for Real Organic and sort of your reason for being. If you could run us through, exactly what that means to you, I think that's a good place to start.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I got into all this not as a policy person. I have been a farmer for 40 some years, and I actually had very little interest in policy or the government's involvement with organic. And when it first came in, I felt it was a mistake to have the government create the National Organic Program. And I think I was wrong about that, but I was afraid that exactly what has happened would happen. And I've learned a lot since then. I got drawn into this because I happen to be somebody who grows tomatoes and wholesales them. And going into the wholesale market, I started to see a lot of tomatoes also certified that were hydroponic. And I thought it had been clearly established that that could not be, that did not qualify for organic certification. There were a lot of them, and they were beautiful, and they were inexpensive, and they didn't taste like anything. But that doesn't actually matter so much in the market. It matters to the eater, but it doesn't matter in terms of what's available on the shelf. And there are a lot of other factors that come into that. So I started to get drawn into discussing this with the National Organic Program and the National Organic Standards Board. And for the first time in many years, I was kind of pulled off my farm and into this world of policy. And so I kind of come at it from a really opposite thing of just sort of an angry citizen standing up at these meetings and going, well, this isn't right. This isn't what we mean. And I am now disgustingly expert at policy issues around organic. It was not my ambition to learn so much about that, but I had to, and indeed, one of my regrets is that I was not more involved in that 40-year period. It was a mistake because we needed to be paying attention. We needed to be more engaged as concerned citizens in order to keep this from going off the rails. And what I discovered as I got into it is that things were much worse than I realized. And I thought when we started that we were talking about one rule around whether or not we would certify food, fruits and vegetables grown without soil as organic, which if for everyone who understands what organic means, and I think you mostly do understand what organic means, that's a complete contradiction. And organic must be about the fertility of the soil. And we knew that, and it was in the law clearly over and over, and it's recognized around the world. This is not some strange idea. This is what organic means. So I thought we just had a little regulatory bump, and I started some petitions and started to get friends to get engaged, and we actually had some people who are fairly prominent signing those petitions, and so it became a deal, and we started to talk about it. As I got in, I realized it was all about the animals and the livestock also being falsely certified, and then the grain fraud, which was huge, which is what they were using to feed the animals in the CAFOs that shouldn't have been certified, so now they've got a double whammy. But they're getting away with all of it, and it seemed to be that we were helpless to change and just get the law enforced. And I've gone so far as to sue the USDA with a group of other farmers, and we lost. And we appealed it and we lost again. And we thought, okay, the courts are not going to protect us either. This is not good news. This is not good news. And on the second appeal, the court said, this is I can't think the term, but it was non-binding, meaning it couldn't be used as a legal precedent. They didn't feel very good about their ruling, but they also weren't going to rule against the USDA. And they were going to go, well, if the USDA wants it, so be it. So I've come to this, the creation of the Real Organic Project was because policy wasn't working for me or any of us. And I felt that rather than be committed to policy reform, which I very much want, but I'm not spending my life working on policy reform. I'm spending my life working on creating an alternative to a broken system, because that seems easier. To create a whole new label and everything seems easier than to persuade the USDA to follow the law. So maybe that's enough, to get us started here.
Can I ask a question? I know, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
So can I ask a question about the lawsuit? We're not going deep in the weeds, but were you suing them to do something?
Yeah, we were suing them to stop certifying
Got it.
Hydroponic as organic. And I didn't invent this lawsuit. It was the Center for Food Safety.
Okay, great.
Zephyr, your bailiwick is corporate power, corporate consolidation, antitrust. I think what Dave is talking about here can arguably be boiled down to an issue of corporate capture of our regulatory body for agriculture, the USDA. And Dave talked about this idea of handing over the spirit of organic to a regulatory body like the USDA. Was that sort of a foregone conclusion when that happened, that we'd be here today? How does this reflect in other aspects of of our world?
Hell no. And I love it, Dave, that I'm so pleased to be here, by the way. I mean, my God, I love speaking to the choir in such a sacred space. I mean, it's extraordinary. And it's a little chilly, but it means we have the wind at our back. So I want to talk about the little regulatory problem, because it is actually an extraordinary regulatory opportunity. I am part of the national global anti-monopoly movement, which in the last few years, while a lot of other things have been going to hell, has been succeeding. Joe Biden announced that one of the 3 prongs of his presidency is addressing the 40-year failure in the vision of markets that was brought on by the Chicago School, and he called it a failure. It's extraordinary. Extraordinary. Not who you'd expect, but extraordinary. He appointed Lena Khan to head the Federal Trade Commission, and the head of who got her start looking at chicken farming and the problems in chicken farming and the problems in the rulemaking around the Packer and Stockyards Act. And Jonathan Cantor to run the DOJ's antitrust division. So I want to talk about little regulatory problems because they're really essential. We give agencies like the USDA the power and responsibility to enforce the law. In the other areas of antitrust law, we have seen in the last, honestly, year, a radical change in the regulatory approach. Just this summer, the Federal Trade Commission, along with the Department of Justice, issued proposed rules regarding mergers that overturned the last 25 years of bad merger policy, which is focused on consumer welfare and efficiency and is instead focused on a thriving, democratic, open economy. Those rules haven't gone into effect yet, but that is what Dave is talking about. The right people at the regulatory agencies can actually do extraordinary things to overturn the last, since 1980, effectively, top-heavy, big ag, agribusiness model that we've had. The key is getting the right personnel and getting the voices heard. So, I focus more on the USDA. We got a lot of work to do on the USDA. I focused more on the Packer and Stockyards Act and the responsibility of the USDA, which keeps saying it's going to do. Vilsack keeps saying it's going to do. He's going to do, put out a rule that would basically ban discriminatory practices, period, by the big meat packers. And we've still got a ways to go, but I'll tell you on the FTC and DOJ side, I didn't expect to go so deep in the weeds right away, but it's really important. Personnel is so critical. Just a few staffers. Antitrust, by the way, antitrust is not a Federal Trade Commission job. There are anti-corporate power rules in every part of the government. They're in the USDA, they're in the HHS, they're in the Defense Department, and they're just these tools that are lying fallow, tools that can be used to take up and create the kind of healthy economy, thriving economy where people can, or real organic farmers can actually thrive. So I know times are tough, but there is an opportunity here because we're winning on antitrust, but we got a lot more work to do on the antitrust work inside the USDA.
Thank you. That was great to get in the weeds there. You mentioned having the right people at these regulatory agencies, but we've heard from speakers today that perhaps that trend is going in the wrong direction for the National Organic Standards Board, and where it's being populated with folks from agribusiness. Maybe to pass it back to Dave, can you sort of paint the picture of what that looks like, where that trend has been going, and exactly sort of who the players are?
Well, when I first got engaged in the issue of the hydroponics, somebody asked me, well, are you dealing with large corporations? And I said, no, actually, it's just this one company from Mexico that seems to be doing this, and they're certifying their tomatoes as hydroponic, as organic. And I was wrong, as usual. And what I discovered, because I served on a USDA task force studying this, and I was one of the token soil people. And at the end of it, we discovered that, in fact, Driscoll's was the biggest hydroponic organic certified product in the world. Driscoll's is 70% of the US organic berry market by their own claim, which, why you would say that out loud, because it's clearly illegal, I don't know. But that's what they said, and that was 6 years ago, so they're a lot more than that now. And that's when I heard that, I suddenly realized why we were losing, and that we were going to lose, because the head of Driscoll's can talk to Tom Vilsack anytime he wants, and I'm sure they have regular conversations. This is a major, they're also 50% of the conventional berries. They are major players in our food system, and we were not going to stop them, in my opinion. That didn't mean that we shouldn't do exactly what we're doing, which was organize and create, as Rehi would say, an insurgency. But it did mean that it was very unlikely on a frontal conflict that we would win. So that was what we realized we were up against. And with milk, Aurora is a huge company. And, you know, so these are big, powerful players. And I also discovered, sort of through a backdoor channel, that the top level of the USDA had been lobbied for some years on this issue. And quietly, I was told it wasn't directly to Vilsack, but probably to somebody in his staff, like maybe his chief of staff, who later became a paid lobbyist for the hydroponic people, for example.
Okay, so Dave and I got our start the same place. We both were farmhands at KillDeer Farm. He was 9 years earlier than me, apparently. We figured this out today. And then Jake and Liz from KillDeer are here today, which was a big excitement. So I feel like I have some ground. Jake, who ran KillDeer, Jake with Liz, ran KillDeer, his highest compliment is being fucking rugged. So we're going to be fucking rugged here, because we are not going to take Driscoll's lying down. I wrote about Driscoll's in my book. Driscoll's is sort of uses the classic tactics. It lobbies directly. We're talking regulatory policy. I'd have to fact check this, but I assume what most of the big companies do now is they also join trade associations where they put up like Harry with a cute dog and a sweet little berry farm, and they have Harry with the cute dog and the sweet berry farm, and they say they represent organic farmers, but the actual funding is coming from Driscoll's. I mean, is that okay?
That's correct.
Okay. These are just like basic early chess moves, you know, right? This is what they do. And then they are ready when there's an administrative turnover with personnel. Are ready. So we are going to take on Driscoll's, and we are going to win.
Good, I can hardly wait.
And we're going to be fucking rugged about it, because one, Vilsack, you know, you remember he came out of 2010 kind of on his heels. He's not looking good right now, right? In the chicken industry, which we'll talk about more later, and in meat packing, I mean, the Obama history was a failure, and it was sort of an open public failure. So he's got something to prove, and we know it, right? So there's political, but there hasn't been a lot of push right now in this administration on Vilsack himself, and we can keep building more. Second, there's a few people at the USDA that I know that are in there, and they are lonely. They want other people to be in there with them. So we've got to identify those young lawyers who want to take on the world and think the way to do it is X, and say the way to do it is to go work inside, because it really matters. Like actually, literally, who is inside those agencies? Who is slowing down the rulemaking? And then the other thing is finding common cause with the other, the unlikely bedfellows, the others who are who want different kinds of rulemaking in the USDA. Because if you try to do it alone, everybody isolated, the advantage that you have in farming, I mean, I'm learning so much here and I'm loving this, but the advantage you have in farming that pharmacists don't have, that so many people in so many industries where the same thing is happening don't have, is people think they understand what you do. They don't, but they think they understand it. It feels accessible. And people do care about healthy food. We know that, even if it ends up getting fakeified. So I just don't want to give up right now. Like we can't just say we're just going to walk away. Building the alternative model is really important, but I actually think there's a real possibility in rulemaking in this USDA in the next 5 years.
I'm ready, right? I've never given up. I haven't. We obviously have to reform government. We have to. There's too much power there. There's too much that needs to be done. But in the meantime, it's been my belief that we can't reform government until we build a movement. Yeah. We have to have a lot of people. I was at a meeting with Shelley. Shelley couldn't make it today, but she really wanted to be here. I was at a meeting with her, and she was talking about the Green New Deal. And actually, the meeting was at Abby's house. And I said, Shelley and McGovern cannot do this without us, without a big movement behind them. It would just be political suicide. If we want to see these changes, we have to organize, just the way Kristen said that the farmers can't do it without the eaters. We have to be together in this, or we will fail. Yeah. So love it.
Let's occupy the rotunda at the USDA.
I'll come with you.
Okay. But I agree. I mean, I don't disagree with you. You can't do it without. It's just that it doesn't have to be everybody, right?
No.
Yeah.
Actually, a relative handful, but we do need a committed core.
Yeah.
Who will come and join the occupation of the USDA. I hope you'll all join us there.
Well, I mean, you look at network neutrality, which the successes around taking on, taking on network neutrality. That was a movement, but it wasn't like everybody. It was just an organized, dedicated movement that really changed the rulemaking during the Obama era. It got undone. It's getting redone, but it's an example of like how we're not going to Margaret Mead it up, but yeah, like how a small crew can actually effectively get regulatory change.
You talked about Packers and Stockyards Act. Could you give us a sense of how that fits into this picture for those of us who don't know what that act is all about?
Yep. Okay, what do we got? I got 2 minutes to answer this. Okay, I'm going to go up a level and then come down for a second. In American history, one of the most essential ways to break up corporate power, besides actually literally breaking up corporate power, is requiring those companies that sit in the choke point of an economy to not discriminate. When we took on the railroads in the 1880s, before we even passed the Sherman Act, the first rule was the Interstate Commerce Act, which required the railroads to treat all farmers the same and therefore not govern them. Because if I can treat this farmer one way and this farmer another way, I own them. I own them, right? So the first federal anti-monopoly movement is non-discrimination. Railroads. 1917, we got a problem. 4 meat packers control the system. And there is a public move to say non-discrimination. The Packer and Stockyard Act cannot use unfair and discriminatory practices. So highs and lows, ups and downs, but those 4 meat packers then by 1976 control they're still big, they're still a problem, but it's 25% instead of dominating. The Packer and Stockyards Act actually works at enabling farmers to be able to come to a meat packer and not be discriminated against. And then you have the Reagan Revolution, you have the ascendancy of efficiency, you have both agencies, enforcers, and courts, both say all of these rules should be interpreted through the lens of consumer welfare. However, and so there is a massive rolling back of rulemaking under Packer and Stockyards. Under Obama, Vilsack does all these tours, meets with farmers. The farmers are terrified and still showing up. Terrified because when you can discriminate, if you speak up, you're truly canceled, right? But they speak up and they have proposed rules, and the proposed rules don't actually happen. We still have these proposed rules. We're ready to go. Proposed rules that would reassert that the big concentrated meat packers cannot discriminate between different people coming there. I use that as one example, but the non-discrimination rule is really critical in ag. I mean, you guys know this, that in order to build, this is the chicken and egg question, is that part of building political power is building those people who can speak up. And when people are dominated because they are discriminated against, there's just so much fear out there. Farming is so full of fear. You guys aren't a fearful bunch, but most people I talk to are a lot more overcome with just terror of what is going to happen if they actually speak their mind, given the dependency on Tyson or somebody else. So sorry, I took way too many minutes. 4. I thought I could do it in 2, but it would be a really big deal because it's a big deal for the Packer and Stockyards Act, but it's also a big deal for saying non-discrimination is a key American principle that we need in every single part of our economy. When you have a choke point control, maybe we allow you to exist, but if we allow you to exist, you cannot discriminate and therefore govern that whole economy.
That idea of a choke point, I think, relates to what's happening in organic dairy. And so, Dave, I thought maybe you could speak a little bit about the crisis with Horizon in the Northeast and how that's playing out, and kind of weave in the issue of not enforcing the letter of the law and the way that's played out in industrial organic.
So one of the things that I saw was back not that long ago, maybe 2016, it looked like most of the dairy in Vermont was going to go organic in the next 10 years. It was the one place that a small farm, and even the big farms in Vermont are small farms, it was the one place that a small dairy farm could get a pay price in which they could survive. And it was pretty exciting. And all of a sudden, a lot of small farms were making a living. and able to replace their equipment and all those good things that are the sign of a healthy business. And there was a tipping point right about then, a little bit after, but by 2018, the pay price was plummeting. And it was plummeting because large CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations, were now starting to flood the organic market with cheap milk. And they could make it cheap because they were CAFOs, they were very efficient at a monocrop thing, and also they were paying a very low price for their organic grain that probably wasn't organic, and they were mostly feeding grain, not grass. So the whole thing was wrong. There was a wrongness to it. And the outcome of that is that the dairy farms went from making a living to just barely surviving or not surviving. We've been losing them steadily since then. And it really came to a kind of a tipping, or let's say, it became very visible when Horizon, which is a big company owned by a much bigger company, owned by Danone, which owns Dannon and other things. They're the second biggest dairy company in the world. And that's a very interesting story, too. We're okay? Okay, I see thumbs up from down low. Okay, so Horizon made the decision to stop buying from all of their suppliers, supplying farms in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and the eastern part of New York. And it was, I can't remember, 97 farms, I think, something like that, were going to be cut off in X months. For these farms, it was essentially death sentence. They were losing their contract. It ended up that many of them were picked up by Stonyfield and Organic Valley, but mostly without contracts. So they were just living day to day, right? They were in incredible peril. And they were already going out of business. That's the bad part, is that they were already operating off of their past glory, not able to maintain their equipment, not able to improve. So this became very visible, and I got involved in it. We actually did a symposium about it. But one of the things that was fascinating to me, I don't know if anybody knows who Emmanuel Faber is, but he was the CEO of Danone, and he was very visionary. And he was the most visionary CEO of a large multinational corporation I ever encountered. And he was truly an inspiring speaker. I wished I could talk like him. And he had this vision of Danone becoming a company actually dedicated to the good of us, and a company actually dealing with creating food that was healthy and working with local economic ecosystems. I mean, it was pretty exciting. And you go, is this real? Is this for true, or is this just talk? And if it was just talk, he was awfully good at it. And then they had a down year, and he got fired. And for me, it was crystal proof that what we're dealing with is a system and not bad people and good people. Because, okay, he was a good person, and as a result, he lost his job. It isn't like if we could only get a good person to be head of the USDA. We know we could get someone who's even worse, no matter how bad they are. But the point being, if they were really good, they're not going to last. They're going to get chewed up and spit out by the economic forces that are driving that. So I'm excited by Zephyr's idea that with enough sunshine, right, enough public scrutiny, enough of us being involved, maybe we can change that. But I don't think it's just a matter of getting a good person.
I don't don't disagree. I mean, I just mean that when there's those moments, we also need to be there. We also need that staffing there.
And we do need good people.
Yeah, we do need good people.
But they need us.
So just two things. I mean, I completely agree with you, is that in the 70s, a lot of the left made a bargain. Maybe it wasn't even seen as a bargain by some at the time. But the consumer rights movement was basically, if we can get our policies through, we'll work with big companies. And we'll work with big companies because if we can work with McDonald's and make all of McDonald's organic, then we'll have done it very quickly. We're not dealing with the decentralized market. And it was a really core part of progressive ideology from the late 70s, not everywhere, but as the dominant part, is the sort of consumer rights vision. Work with, hold accountable, unsafe at any speed, hold accountable big companies and transform those business practices by getting a seat at the table. It's broken. And then there were none. Because when you are now down to just 2 berry companies that are just financial companies with the berry guys, it doesn't matter. You don't have the seat at the table anymore. You basically, if you allow those mergers to happen. And so part of what has happened, part of the way that Danone gets in the position it does, is that we've had 40 years of merger policy that have allowed just merger after merger after merger. Vertical, up and down the supply chain, and horizontal. And that combination across the board then creates, non-discrimination is a partial answer, but we really do need to break up this power, because there is nobody who, I totally agree with you, there is nobody who can sit in that seat that is ever going to be the advocate for organic. And the other thing is, I guess I just see, maybe a different way to put it is, we're talking financiers, because this is basically the labor, and labor law is the law that controls how workers can organize. Antitrust and anti-monopoly law is the way that stops capital from organizing. So we need both, and we need to do a lot better job at taking on capital and capital concentration at its root. And so when I come here and see the extraordinary, this is just so amazing what's happening here. But capital wants us to think there's a berry problem here and a dairy problem here and a Uber driver problem here and a pharmacy problem here, and they are totally sector specific. But what we have is a problem of core democratic health and power. And so it is only when we join together and I believe, make this a whole of government anti-monopoly movement that we can succeed, and not just keep it every sector where Driscoll owns USDA and Verizon owns another part.
I just want to say that I agree. And I agree because Zephyr has taught me this, although today's the first day we've met, but I've read her book, Break 'em Up, twice. And it's so important and significant in understanding what the problem is. And every step along my way, I kept going, oh, this is bigger than I thought. Oh, this is bigger than I thought. The problem kept getting bigger and more connected to all these other problems, until in the end, it feels like it's all one problem. And I believe that it's true that a key part of that one problem is that we have a vast concentration of power in the hands of a few, and they don't know how to handle it responsibly. And they can't. It's too much energy. So we need to diversify our financial system as much as and our political system as much as we diversify our soil.
Thanks, Dave. Let's talk about what what we can do as individuals. And Dave and Zephyr jump in here, but we're people, we all eat every day. We know of this concept of voting with our wallet when we go to the supermarket, but the concentration and power that Zephyr's talking about is such that when you go to a supermarket, you see what is, what looks like a whole diversity of labels, but the reality is they're owned by very few. What can we do, beyond, informing ourselves about what we buy in the supermarket, beyond this call to understanding and knowing the story of your farmer? What can we do as people to really join this movement and see the whole picture?
You go first, Zephyr.
Well, where are people from here? Just shout it out. What's the small group? Okay. Okay. So you go talk to Becca, and you go talk to Mark, and you go talk to Pat. I missed some. I'm talking about your Congress members. No, and you're shaking your head. Why? Sorry. You should be rude. Come on, well, let's be real. What?
There's one word that defines the problem, and it's money. And all of our elected representatives, with very few exceptions, Tester, Higley, are owned by money. They're not owned by the people who vote for them. The only example that's going to work, somebody in your group today said, we're the resistance now. And we can only wear them down by wearing down the establishment. And the idea that appointees at the Department of Agriculture are going to help us win is to me admirable but fantastic. The only thing we can do is educate people and encourage them to buy good food.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
Do that and the rest will fall apart. You talk about the government and antitrust. Albert's buying Kroger.
They're doing everything they can to stop it.
They're not stopping it, and you know it.
But the way we get, this is a really important conversation. I think the way that we get the new laws, if they don't stop it, because the FTC wants to stop it, if they don't stop it, that gives us the proof. So this is a really important conversation. So what I believe is that I believe we should absolutely vote with our feet. Whatever you want to, go, and that matters. And I believe that will never be sufficient, that it has to be political. And so the political story is not sitting and asking nicely and then going away. But it is going to Pat and saying, you write the letter to Vilsack. And if the letter isn't written, that group of four then has that story. You walk through, you show what is not happening, and then you work on the anti-monopoly movement by building with the local pharmacists who are no longer able to survive.
There are none left.
Well, there's none in Columbia County. Yeah.
When I moved to Massachusetts from abroad, there were 379 local pharmacists. There's now 19. 19. Family-owned businesses. And
those pharmacists are mad. And so when you join pharmacists, I'm not willing to give up.
They're not mad. They're looking for the next payday to sell it to CVS or Walgreens.
So
because that's their only choice, not because they want to.
No, right, exactly.
That's their only choice.
Yeah, no.
So I write to, I'm from Massachusetts. I live in Massachusetts now. I lived abroad for 23 years. People ask me why I came back. I said, I miss America. I said, I still do. Yeah. Okay. This system is so effed up, it's not real. And I write we have two senators that I rate pretty highly, Markey and Elizabeth Warren, and my local congressman's okay. They don't answer me anymore. And I'm not even rude to them, like I am being to you. They don't answer me anymore because there's nothing they can do about the problems that I bring to their attention. There's nothing they can do about education. There's nothing they can do about gun safety. There's nothing they can do about food safety. There's nothing they can do about extortive rights and commercial practices by everybody. By the banks, the telephone companies. These are all regulated industries, and there's nothing they can do. And unless we're willing to start like the bad guys did with the Federalist Society 30 years ago, we don't even have a judicial system left.
Okay, so I'll just, and we can continue, but I think it's an important conversation. So who I take inspiration from are the progressive populists in the 1880s who were losing. But they did not give up, and they built a story in dissent. They built the record in dissent that later provided the foundation of the laws in the 1940s. So yes, it's a 60-year plan. It's not a 2-year plan. It's not like, and then tomorrow everything will be better. But it is actually seriously engaging as political entities and not just as consumers, which I think is absolutely essential.
Dave, do you have anything to say?
I
know you do.
This is a very important conversation.
It's real.
Right? It's a very important conversation. And, actually my heart is with Bill and with Zephyr here. I do believe, I agree with Bill that we can go to the great people in Congress and we can try to get other great people, but I agree that this is not going to be a quick solution. It's not going to look like a solution, and we can create something that will start to look like a solution ourselves directly. And obviously, that's why the Real Organic Project exists. Before, when we were Keep the Soil Organic, we were attempting to reform the USDA. That was our purpose. We were, talk about a grassroots organization. We had a budget of 0. We had a leadership of 0. It was just almost these spontaneous gatherings of farmer protests. But we failed, and I kind of figured we were going to fail, and that's okay, because in that process, we came together. We had 60 farmers from around the country go down to Jacksonville, Florida to testify. It was beautiful. The people who were on the stage this morning, that's what it sounded like when all those 60 farmers got up and testified. I was like ready to weep. Surely these people who don't know very much, who were chosen to be on the National Organic Standards Board, will hear them, and they did not. Not a single one changed their vote. We went in with 7 votes, we came out with 7 votes. But those 60 people heard each other, and a movement started to recoalesce that once started, right? And we're all part of that movement. So, and I do believe we can't abandon government, even if government has abandoned us. We have to keep working and trying. So I'm excited to have Zephyr here and hear her ideas, because they're fresh ideas for me. And, she's been thinking about this while we've been thinking about how do we get real coffee up here? How do we get real tomatoes here, right? We all want the same things, and Zephyr wants those too.
Yeah, no, and sorry, I totally respect where you're coming from, totally. I am more worried about apathy and people checking out than I am about anything.
That's the second problem. We don't have, the first Earth Day year, my wife and I lived on 12th Street, New York City. Yep. We went up to 14th Street, and I said, this is it. We're going to be okay. We'd stopped Nixon just about. We'd stopping the war just about. And now we were going to save the planet. And we had Republicans leading that. It's all gone. Nobody cares anymore about anything except for money. I'm sorry. We are a corrupt empire at the edge. Now, it might change, but it's going to have to change fast. We don't have 60 years. I'm
not disagreeing, but I do want to say I come from money and politics. That's where I started. Money and politics, there's no question that that's the root issue. There's no question, right? I came to corporate power because I think we should be taking on power where it lies, not just saying once you've accumulated power, you can't give it, which we also have to say. I was cited all over the dissent of Citizens United. I am there with you on money and politics, right? But I think it is important to call out the fundamental illegitimacy of concentrated power itself, not just the spending of money on concentrated power.
You can yell.
I'm just curious, how much of it is a consumer problem? Because I'm a large business, I'm a consolidator, and my warehouseman said, you guys only care about the money, you send those jobs overseas. And I said, I don't do that, you do. Because you go to Walmart to buy a shirt, not made by a work union worker, but by someone being paid, $2 a week. So my question is, how much does the consumer own of this issue?
I think it is I use this word sparingly, but maybe I'm not. I think it is a gaslighting. I do not think that it is going to be, I think we have individual and collective responsibility. There is power in some consumer movements, but the idea that it is a consumer problem, as opposed to the idea that there is nothing more fundamental that a government does than organize how an economy works. Nothing more fundamental, nothing more fundamental. That is like the core job, right? There are always rules. There's rules at your farmer's market. There has never been a market without rules, right? It's just, right, exactly, right. Reagan, and they created new rules, and then they gaslight people into saying if there's a problem, it's the consumer's problem. That's right. But I got to tell you, here's why I'm going to be. You guys can all tell me I shouldn't be hopeful, but here's why I'm going to be hopeful. In the last 2 years, I know you can laugh. This is the funny. This is the funny. It's a gambler's hope. It's not a probabilistic hope. It's a gambler's hope. Right? We got a 7 and 8 playing. I'm staying in the game. That's only speaking to the 4% of you who are poker players, but it's not an ace king. The last 3 years, it broke. They had one job, and they were wrong about that one job, but their one job was to keep prices low. In COVID, the supply chains broke. That market they built, it broke, and people died because it broke. And there's an opening here to say, they can't even work on their own terms. Tyson's profits are going up. You may have seen yesterday's news. It's not a big surprise. Big ag profitability is going up. Their system was supposed to keep, all the money flowing to consumers. It doesn't work. It is not consumers' problem. It is our collective job to organize an economy where you can have a free and fair and open economy. I do not think it is a consumer problem.
I think we have another comment from the audience.
Yeah, so I'm definitely with you on consumer choice being a limited kind of way of organizing action, and that actually strikes me as like a very capitalistic way of looking at the food system, and that can exacerbate existing inequalities and who has access to stuff, who has the money to buy organic, who has the time to cook slow food. These are all questions that I think need to be considered along with everything. And another thing that strikes me is it doesn't seem like, I feel like there's a binary that's been come up in this conversation where it's either you call your representative or you totally give up on politics and just buy organic. But it seems like the conversation should be around direct action, unions, they're able to strike. That's where they get their very concrete political power. And I'm wondering where that action comes within farming. And what are the concrete ways that we can organize that hold systems of power to account and make it so that these politicians who are in the pockets of big businesses have no other choice but to come to the table and negotiate?
I have some thoughts, but I've been chatting away, so.
Go for it.
So, in the 80s, 90s, the sort of supply chain consumer strike had some successes, sweatshop successes. Nowadays, it is really hard to do a consumer strike. It's hard because of the structure of social media. So people are like, yeah, I'm consumer striking, and then the Chick-fil-A strike lasts for if you're lucky, 6 weeks, right? The best example of this is the major, extraordinary, organized strike. Small businesses, big businesses, mostly big businesses, striking Facebook, organized by Color of Change. It lasted 3 months. They had everybody on board because of how Facebook was delivering up violent, radicalizing content. You got to stop this. They just outweighted them. And that's like as organized as you get. That's not just consumers, that's money, that's advertising dollars. It is really hard to have that effective strike. What I do think is more effective is this is not a full answer. You guys are going to figure this out. I'm not going to figure it all out. And I don't think you should, I appreciate you saying it's not either or. It's not like you shouldn't also engage in these. I just want to be honest about there is some evidence that people who engage in consumer strikes also feel less obliged to engage politically in whatever form, whether that's, being nice to Mark Molinaro, which has got to be one of the most maddening, or whatever form. So I think it's not costless, the sort of consumer strike model, but going straight to power, where power lies, the agencies. This is a less aggressive model, but I like, and you can tell me what the opportunities are in the state level, but we're starting to have anti-monopoly successes at the state level in legislation. We, Minnesota, we got some Minnesotans here, just changed some significant rules at the state level. So I don't know if you can do that with certification though,
No, it's really hard to create change anyway, right? We've tried everything. We called for a moratorium on the certification of hydroponics back in 2016, 17, and we got a meeting with the head of the Agricultural Marketing Service, which is who runs the National Organic Program, and she was wonderful, actually a wonderful person. She was one of those good ones that snuck in. And when I met with her, she said, well, I wrote the letter to call for the moratorium on certification, but the lawyers here said we're just going to get sued to death, so I'm not allowed to send that letter, right? And it's an example of how a good person who really gets it isn't enough. We need a movement. But I don't know, honestly, I wish I had some clear answers of like, well, if we just do this, that'll happen, but I don't. So I think that political activism is great, and I support it, and I know that we have many ideas of what good might look like, but I think we don't have much disagreement about what good would look like. We might have disagreements about what the political landscape might look like, but not disagreements about what we want to get to in our food system. But I also think direct action, obviously we do choose every day what we buy. Zephyr has convinced me that that's not enough, and I believe that's right. But it's always where we must start. And somehow to get to the political action, we have to have a movement. We have to have a lot of people who are willing to speak together. And that's what Kristen is talking about just who subscribes to her CSA. She's an activist farmer, and she's getting people to think about their food, what they eat, how they obtain it, and she offers excellent food, grown in a way that all of us would really support. So for me, that is a model for change. It's not just a model for better food for her customers. It's a model for creating a conversation that we hope, spreads, and in a, like a fungus, mycelium, that it spreads and affects others, and it affects others, and it affects others.
So in the last few minutes that we have, I think, just to wrap it up here, it sounds like we need to be more politically active as citizens, as eaters, and yeah, I mean, I think, I don't know. Is there anything? Is there anything more we need to say about that? I mean,
I'll just end with like, what happened to us nationally and globally in the 80s is they cut out our tongues. They took away our language. They took away to talk to each other. They took away the sources of community. They took away our sense of authority, where we feel like we have to know everything before we can speak. They took away a vision of what it is to be a human. And so we're mad and depressed, right? There's a lot of legitimate, I'm not saying you're depressed. I'm mad, right? Better to be mad, right? But there's and they took away a sense of like, what is the way out? And so why I go to the 1890s is because those guys, Black Americans, had lost what our country had promised to regain. Women fighting for the right to vote had been losing for 40 years. And big business had just taken over, and they did not stop fighting. And so, I don't know, like, we're gonna try all these different tactics, right? We're gonna stay fertile and diverse in our approach and come together in these extraordinary moments where we can do this. So, but I am not willing to give up on the power of the fact we are suing Google now, and I know Big Ag spends money, but gotta tell you, Google spends a lot of money. We are suing Amazon, and I know Driscoll controls the USDA, but Amazon has been controlling tax policy in this country for a while. Like, there are these cracks in the system, and like letting the light through, and we are gonna go towards that light.
thank you, Zephyr. Thank you, Dave. I hope you guys enjoyed the conversation. Abby, would you like to say something?
The business, when capitalism became bigger than the merchant. There was the merchant and the customer. When capitalism won, they named us what they wanted us to be, and the primary meaning of consumer, of to consume, is to destroy utterly. And they want us to destroy what they make so they can make it again. And so we are creators, we are devastators, we are destroyers. We do what they ask us to do. We buy it and we throw it out. And there is, recycling is a farce. So I'm just saying, I can't imagine fighting this under the banner of consumer anything.
That's a good point.
Yeah. We have to retake language that is ours, that we believe in. What are we? We are people first, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you are subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Tuesday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.